There's been something happening, primarily within the Democratic Party, where Black Democrats have been making this, I don't know, comparison here between what has happened with immigration and what happened with slavery. And Bari Sellers really stepped in it. He made a comment, it went viral on social media, and people are just really chewing him out. Like they are eating Bakari alive. And honestly, I can't blame the folk. I can't blame the folks. But it didn't start with Bakari. I want to take you back to a time when the first time I heard someone say this, it was Simone Sanders. That was 7 years ago. And she said this on CNN. Listen, just pay attention, folks. It's very dangerous. And so I do like to try to educate everybody. For people who are not Black that are watching, I want to explain to you why this comparison is dangerous. Listen to this.
Individuals who were charged with separating these young people from their parents, how are they being trained, and were they in fact being trained? And what we've seen in transcripts from mothers and family members who have had their children ripped out of their arms at the border, it seems as though training is not taking place. And so I hope Senator Kamala Harris gets answers to her questions, but this is a cruel and unusual policy. And this is a policy that harkens back to what America did during the times of slavery, when they took children and they separated families from their mothers and fathers when folks are being sold off into slavery. So if we really want to be better, we better start walking the walk.
So, yeah, not the same thing. Not the same thing. Yes, there was children separation, at the border, but the separation from a child during slavery, when a child was taken from her parents, that child was sold to be a slave by another owner. Slaves were property. That was 7 years ago, Simone Sanders. I had to show you that because I want you to see it did not start with Bakari. But this is what Bakari is getting yelled at for. I said, what the hell did Bakari just say? Calling slavery immigration is dangerous. There's a huge difference between stealing people from their home and forcing them to do unpaid labor versus people who came here on their own and received paid labor. And I told people, I warned you, I was going to discuss this on Sunday. The conversation here is about healthcare. But he went there. He went there.
To make your vision of America work, we need more illegals who get more benefits. That's your version of America.
No, what I want from America is a place that was promised to us, Scott.
To the illegals?
Like you do. No, it was promised to us. It was promised to us, not us, me and you, black and white, brown. Scott, do you think that your family was born here? You weren't born here, Scott.
I was born in.
First of all, where does your family come from? My family wasn't born here. My family was actually from Sierra Leone.
You're making a passionate argument for a country built on unfettered illegal immigration, and that is not anywhere near a politically popular position.
Our country is built on immigration, period.
What kind?
Period.
What kind?
Okay. Oh, and first of all, before we go to commercial, what kind? What kind of immigration was I brought here?
You're already in the hole. You sure you want to stop digging?
No, because it was slavery. That's not immigration.
Come on.
Well, okay.
Come on, what?
All right, there's a lot to be said.
Hold on. No, but you can't say come on.
Let's go back and we're going to walk through this, folks. So again, the conversation here is about healthcare. That's what they were talking about. One of the things that they bring up is, well, you don't want, Scott said, do you want to give everybody healthcare? You guys want to give healthcare to people who are illegal immigrants, etc. And it's interesting that Bakari brings up, well, things for you and me as a black person and during this conversation about healthcare. But he doesn't even mention that this is the important part. When Bakari says in this discussion that he wants everybody to have healthcare, I want everybody to have healthcare. That's one thing I agree with him with, right? But what Bakari, he conveniently, nobody on this panel talked about why we don't have it. The first reason why. Now, obviously, everybody knows Big Pharma is a big part of this. We got that. We get it. We're good. But that wasn't the first reason. The first reason why we didn't have healthcare for everybody is because they didn't want black people to have healthcare. I've shown the video about this multiple times on the show. Not one person, including the young woman named Kat, who is running for office, who's challenging an incumbent, not one person on this panel discussion brought that up. Now, why is that significant? Because they're talking about Medicaid, they're talking about Medicare, etc. Even when we bring up Social Security, the restrictions that you have on Medicare and Social Security are also for that same reason. Because see, the idea was that if we didn't have health insurance, we didn't have health care, we probably wouldn't even make it to be 65 to get the Medicare. It's the same reason why you have the restrictions on Social Security. So people have to educate themselves, and you got to pass this information on to other people. So what was interesting to me is that Bakari was saying, we got to fight for everybody and yada, yada. Great. Okay. If that's what you want to do, great. But not one person during this discussion mentions why we didn't have it. That's a failure. And I brought this out before. This is a failure from the progressive movement, not universal health care, because I support universal health care, but not going into the specifics of how they were trying to make it so that Black people would not have health care. That is very important. So we're going to walk through this again.
To make your vision of America work, we need more illegals who get more benefits. That's your version of America.
No, what I want from America is a place that was promised to us, Scott.
To the illegals?
Like you do. No, it was promised to us. It was promised to us, not us, me and you, black and white, brown. Scott, do you think that your family was born here? You weren't born here, Scott.
I was born in
First of all, where does your family come from? My family wasn't born here. My family was actually from Sierra Leone.
You're making a passionate argument for a country built on unfettered illegal immigration, and that is not anywhere near a politically popular position.
Our country is built on immigration, period.
What kind?
Period.
First mistake from Bari Sellers. Our country is built on immigration. The country was built from the labor of slaves. That's what started it. It was built from the labor of slaves, which was free labor. That's what started the building of this country. Whether it was cotton, whether it was rice, whether it was rum in Rhode Island. Yes, Rhode Island at one point was the third largest for the slave trade. A lot of people in Rhode Island don't like to talk about that. They don't really like to get in that. Everybody mentions the South, but they conveniently kind of hush about Rhode Island. Definitely. Also, highly involved because of the rum. So they were bringing in rum at the ports at Rhode Island. South Carolina, primarily rice, also some cotton. North Carolina, cotton, etc., tobacco. You guys get where I'm going. Anyway, that built the economy. Because the work was being done free. There was no pay. People weren't paid. Slaves weren't paid. They weren't allowed to read, write, weren't allowed to have education. And when we talk about Miss Simone Sanders, when you say that the children were taken away, why don't we talk a little bit more about how those children were taken away, what was done to those children? You're talking about even to the extent where in some cases they were taking the baby out of the womb brutally. For my females in the audience, when you go to the OBGYN, you know why you're able to do that and why those studies exist? Guess who they experimented on? Slaves with no anesthesia. And we're not going to get into the details of the instruments that are used because I ain't trying to freak people out, especially the dudes who are watching, because some of the guys probably like, I don't want to know all that. But the women know what I'm talking about. Google it and you'll see the instruments that they used on slaves back then. That's who they practiced on against their will. Then after slavery, when you talk about going into like Reconstruction and you talk about the Black Wall Streets, every time Black people built something, it was burned to the ground. If it wasn't burned to the ground, it was taken by eminent domain. If it wasn't taken by eminent domain, it's taken now currently through a process called gentrification. The process still continues, folks. Bakari Sellers is getting ratioed by everyone on social media because not only did he say this, but he said it to a white person. But this is the worst part of all.
What kind?
Oh, first of all, before we go to commercial, what kind of immigration was I brought here?
You're already in the hole. You sure you want to stop digging?
No, because it was slavery. That's not immigration.
Come on.
No. And I'll explain why. He said slavery, that's not immigration. Here's why what Bakari Sellers said is so dangerous. When you say that slavery is immigration, you're diminishing what was done to slaves. First of all, slaves were property. When you immigrate to the country, there's a difference between coming here because you want to come here. And yeah, you got to work hard. You get a job, you probably be paid under the table. Let's face it, a lot of us knew we at some point knew somebody that was paid under the table or not on the books or whatever. Yeah, I'm not here to say that's not, it's easy. It's not easy, but it's not the same thing. When you come here, when you immigrate and come here to the US, especially if you have kids, guess what? Your kids can go to school. They can learn English at school. They can learn to read and write at school. I worked in the education system. I've seen it. So a lot of times the family members don't have to teach them because the teachers will teach them at school. Slaves weren't allowed to read and write. Do not make this comparison. Like, this really pissed me off. They weren't allowed to read and write. Whipped, beaten, stolen, worked for free. For people who immigrate here, don't get me wrong, most of the time they're not making minimum wage. They're working for a lot less in corporations like that because they want to pay low labor so that they can make more money for themselves. So always keep that in mind. But they're paid. Slaves weren't paid. And he represents South Carolina. Bakari Sellers knows better, damn it. He knows better. Who do you think, why do you think South Carolina, in particular Charleston, is so much known for its rice? Who do you think made the rice? Bakari Sellers at this point sounds like this clown. I just want to take you back to when Ben Carson said this. So I want you to tell me the difference between Ben Carson and Bakari Sellers right now. Because Ben Carson, Republican, Bakari Sellers, Democrat, both of them walking around saying crazy stuff like this.
There were other immigrants who came here in the bottom of slave ships, worked even longer, even harder for less. That's what America is about. A land of dreams and opportunity. There were other immigrants who came here in the bottom of slave ships, worked even longer, even harder for less.
This was Ben Carson in 2017. So now we got Simone Sanders, Ben Carson, and Bakari Sellers saying this line. When you say statements like this, then you wonder why you have some of the schools that are saying, oh, we're just not going to talk about slavery anymore. We're not going to teach about that. Or we're just going to say it was about states' rights. We're not going to teach about that. Then you wonder why you have some of the schools saying this bullshit. When you have three well-known Black people making this statement, this is dangerous. Don't ever sit up there and sell that plight as something that was a choice, God damn it. Don't ever sit up here and do that. This is how low Bakari Sellers and Simone Sanders have get. Stop it. I'm so sick of this mess, and I'm passing this message on to everybody. Do not compare slavery to immigration ever again. You can see the difference even here. I swear to God, we shouldn't even have to have this conversation in 2025. Now, this was in response to when Ben Carson said it. I'm waiting for Washington Post. I'm waiting for the article in response to Bari Sellers saying it. But you're probably not going to do that, right? All the people who were outraged at Ben Carson making this comment, I noticed a lot of the liberals are mad quiet. Slaves weren't immigrants, they were property. Why Ben Carson's ahistorical speech matters. Now you got Bakari Sellers, add him to this list. Were enslaved Africans immigrants to the United States? And they go on to talk about what Ben Carson said here, which I just played. Carson's impulse to homogenize our diverse origins lumps everyone together without making important distinctions about the different pathways that dictated people's arrivals. The conditions under which individuals and groups came here on their own accord or were brought here against their will have had monumental consequences for our life, chances, and the evolution of our rights as citizens. Slaves were chattel. Slavery was a violent system of conquest and domination. Africans were kidnapped in the interior of the continent, marched to the coastline, and packed in vessels like inanimate cargo. Some never left the ships alive because of inhospitable conditions on board. The Middle Passage, as it was called, was a deeply alienating journey into hell. There were one-way voyages with no chance of return. And that is another part. Even when we get into the deportations, this is another thing why I do not like this comparison. They have a chance to return. Slaves did not. Not to mention the number of slaves that were thrown off the boats if they got sick. Not the same thing. Again, we got Democrats saying this now. Why are liberals so quiet? If you were vocal under Ben Carson, why are you so quiet now? Why are you so quiet now? 12 million captives were taken to markets in the new settler colonies in North and South America and the Caribbean islands to be sold to the highest bidders, to toil on farms and plantations, in factories and private homes. Goes on and on and on. One of the things that you'll see in the documentary that we're doing as well is you're going to find out about what happened with Beacon Hill. You know, a lot of people come here to Boston, especially if you come here as a tourist. And if you come here as a tourist, you are going to see Beacon Hill at some point or another, duck tour or whatever. And a lot of people don't know that that was a safe haven for slaves that escaped, was Beacon Hill. That was a Black neighborhood. Now it's not. Just another example. Bari Sellers should be embarrassed, but he's not. No one on that panel pushed back on what he said. But if you look on social media, a lot of people are pushing back. Because shit hit the fan. Hey guys, this was a Sabby clip. If you like what you saw, hit that like button and subscribe.